Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and today we are going to be talking about all things silk. I've made my silk Itch to Stitch Majorelle. I'm going to be showing you that, and then I'm going to be going over 5 tips to help you be successful if you're wanting to try sewing with silk yourself. Now, before we get into this, I have a little bit of an announcement. Just for those of you that are in the well, not necessarily. You don't have to necessarily be in the Indianapolis area. You can come from out of town, but if you're somewhat close by, University of Sewing, which is the Bernina dealer that loans me my wonderful Bernina 790, is actually having a really fun event in April. I wanted to tell you about real quick because seats are limited. So if you want to sign up, now is a great time. I will have links down below. It's 2 separate events. It's all centered around embroidery. So it's an OESD, which is the embroidery company that I believe Bernina owns, but you don't have to use a Bernina machine with their products, if that makes a sense. It's good for any embroidery, but Bernina, I believe, does own the OESD embroidery company, if that kind of makes sense. But on April 17th, they're having a seminar. They have an expert that's coming in to show all about how to do all the embroidery. It's a full day event. Lunch is included with the price, snacks. You get to see all the different things that you can do with embroidery. So it's more of a, you don't have to have your machine for this one. This one's more of a come and you look and kind of see that what's going on in the embroidery realm. And then on the 18th and 19th, which are the Thursday and Friday there in April, you can bring your machine as actually 2 options. It's a 2-day event where you can come and use your own machines or try out one of theirs. They just need to know how many people are going to be trying things out, so they make sure they have enough machines. Or you can bring your own embroidery machine. Doesn't have to be Bernina, just has to be in good working order. And you're going to be learning all sorts of embroidery techniques and everything. And that is a 2-day event where you're actually working on your own machine, or letting them know so you can try out one of their embroidery machines that they've got there on site. So anyway, if you're even a little bit interested in embroidery, want to try that out, I think there's a deal if you sign up for both events, for both the 2-day event and the 1-day event. Anyway, I've got links listed down for both events down below if you're interested, but definitely worth a look if you're wanting to delve into some of the embroidery realm. It looks like a lot of fun. I'm not going to be able to be there, unfortunately. I may be able to sneak down a little bit on Wednesday, but Jenny and I are heading to Cleveland for a Sew Expo, so I won't be able to be there that Thursday and Friday, but it sounds like a lot of fun. So definitely something that you may want to have a look-see if that's something that interests you. Okay, let's get into today. Let's talk about my new Majorelle first, and then I will go through my 5 tips. Technically, I've got a little bit more than 5, but we're going with 5. That's a good round number. Okay, so I made the Itch to Stitch Majorelle out of this silk georgette that I got from Mood when I was in New York. Now, they don't have this on their website, but I've linked something similar down below if you're interested in trying it out. Now, what georgette is it is a very lightweight silk, and it's pretty transparent. Not quite as transparent as a chiffon, but still pretty transparent. In fact, I was going back and forth because the print is so busy. I can almost get away with not wearing anything underneath this, I think. But I may end up having to put, I haven't taken pictures in this yet, so I'm going to see how the pictures come back to let me know if when I wear this out in public, if I do need to have like a camisole or something on underneath it. But it's a beautiful fabric. It's very breathable, but it is a larger weave fabric, which means it is not, there's not as many warp and weft threads to make a really dense fabric. I would say a crepe de chine or even a silk charmeuse, are a crepe de chine or a silk charmeuse are silks that are a little more densely woven. So they don't fray quite as bad. They don't move around quite as bad. Get slinky on you and that sort of thing as you're working with them. So if you have never made anything with silk, I would not suggest that you start with a georgette. If you've never made anything from silk, I honestly would suggest starting with a crepe de chine would be my number one recommended fabric that I think you would want to start with. And number two, I think silk charmeuse. Well, we'll get into this a little bit more on when we get into tips, but I have ways of making them behave a little bit better for you. Crepe de chine actually needs very little encouraging. It's actually a wonderful fabric to use. You can also go more the Dupioni, Shantung. That's a little heavier weight fabric. You make like pants and coats and stuff or jackets out of that weight of silk, but it is much easier, you know, sheath dresses, that sort of thing. It is easier to use because it's a little bit thicker and behaves itself a little bit more. But if you're wanting like a nice blouse weight silk, crepe de chine, silk charmeuse would be the two that I would recommend starting off with for your first go. So anyway, this is a Georgette. I made the size 8 with the D cup. This did come up a little small. And the reason it came up a little small is that this Georgette was moving all over the place, even with my stabilizing tricks. And I did French seams on the inside. I'll show you here in a second. But I am almost positive that my French seams there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this pattern. So I was trying to do 1/4 inch, trim it a little bit, and then do 1/4 inch again. But I'm pretty sure that I was not quite on a 1/4 because I was trying to keep things stable and I was gritting my teeth. This was difficult to use. So even with my stabilizing tricks on it, it was still better than if I had not had them. But I have a feeling I took more seam allowance than I should have. It's still very wearable. It just doesn't fit me as loosely as my Majorelle dress does, which, I mean, it's the same pattern. I literally just cut it, shortened it on the top line, cutting line. So that's just is what it is. I did do the ruffle color on this one. I wanted to try it out to see if I liked it or not with my neck. I have a very short neck, and if that was going to be too much. But honestly, it's a pretty short ruffle, so I don't think that it's any more intrusive than if I had a collar on top of that collar band, if that makes sense. So this is kind of fun. I don't know that I would choose it every time I made this pattern, only because ruffles just that's not really my aesthetic. I go for just a little bit cleaner aesthetic, a little more minimalist aesthetic in my clothing. So while I love it for this, and I think it's really fun because this fabric is so light and flowy, I don't know that I need a lot of the ruffle on the neckband in my wardrobe. However, I could totally do quite a few button-up Majorelles in my wardrobe. I kind of want a denim one now. Anyway, I did French seams on everything. So all of my seams are French seamed, which honestly, that's easy to do on this kind of pattern because this pattern does feature raglan sleeves. And it's just less, you don't have to fit a sleeve in, just makes it a little bit less fiddly. You do gather the neck into the neckband, which was quite easy in this fabric, to be honest. And then the sleeves get finished off with elastic. I played around with this on how I wanted to finish this off because you can see through it. What I ended up doing was, I tried all sorts of things. I ripped this out multiple times, but what I ended up doing was serging elastic to the wrong side, right at the edge along the inside of the shirt sleeve and stretching the elastic as I went. So then it pulled it in. And then I just fold the elastic in over itself and stitched it down with a zigzag stitch. So I did this entirely on the Bernina 790. So I had access to my zigzag stitch and everything, and did my buttonholes and all that kind of stuff. And I think it turned out well. Only alterations I made to this was I shortened the sleeves by, I think, only 1/2 inch because I wanted them a little bit longer and a little bit more voluminous. And then I shortened the body 1 inch. That's all I've done as far as alterations on this pattern. Size 8 with the D cup. I mean, it fits really, really well. The fabric is beautiful. I love the watercolor look with the little fox that you see like every now and again. I think I need a minute with this top. I don't know if it's because I was struggling so much sewing it because the fabric was being so difficult, or if it was that it's winter right now and the air is very dry. When I try this on, it sticks to me so badly, just from static. It's a very floaty fabric, so it takes very little static, and it just felt like it was clinging and sticking everywhere that I don't want it to stick or cling. And it was static, and I could feel that, and I don't like the way it feels on my body. However, when the humidity starts to set in, when it gets a little bit warmer, I may change my mind. So this could just be a temporary I don't like the way this feels type of thing with this shirt, because the fabric is absolutely gorgeous. It feels beautiful to the touch. Honestly, if it were between a polyester georgette or a silk georgette, I would pick silk every time to work with. Silk does stick to itself a lot more than a polyester does. So I do much prefer sewing with a silk than a polyester. But the other thing, as I'm going through this style journey, I'm not sure if I have to wear something underneath this, and we're going to find out. If I don't have to wear something underneath this, it'll be a different story. If I do find that I need to wear a camisole or something underneath this, I just can see myself not reaching for this very much at all. I don't like layering things under my shirts. Now, a little bit of a caveat, because I'll wear like a button-down shirt underneath a sweater, but then even then you have to like really get things settled, and it takes a minute in the morning when you're putting your clothes on to get everything exactly where you want it. I feel like when I've made sheer shirts like this in the past where I do have to wear something underneath it, and not just like a sheer silk, but like an open mesh or something that goes over a camisole, I do find that I'm constantly fiddling with it because inevitably it'll stick to the fabric that's underneath it, or I feel like something's riding up on the lower leg layer. I don't know. It feels fussy to me. So I am probably not going to be as likely to put it on than if I didn't have to wear anything underneath it. So we're going to see. We're going to see if this print is busy enough that once it's pressed up against skin, if you can't like see everything through it. It may be, but if I do end up having to wear something underneath it, I don't know. I can see me wearing it as a topper piece, maybe like over a dress or something like that, like even tying it in the front, that sort of thing. So we'll give it a minute. We'll see. I'm not making any judgments on it. It's definitely too cold to wear it right now because it feels like I'm wearing nothing when I have this shirt on. So it'll be a little bit. It'll definitely be later spring before I'm able to pull this out of the closet. And I'd be fine wearing like a jacket over it, or even my vest, my cream sweater vest would be kind of cute. I'll play around with it. I'm not writing this off, but I definitely had feelings of I've spent an entire day making this shirt and my head's about ready to explode now, and I don't know that I like it. That spiral, which again I think is more just the way it feels on my body. So we're going to give it some time, let the air not be so dry around here, and then come back to it again later. But this is gorgeous fabric, and it does feel lovely to touch. So anyway, that is my new silk blouse. So let me give you some tips if you are planning on or curious about sewing with some silk, or maybe even scared to sew with some silk. It's honestly one of, I think probably my favorite fabrics to work with are probably cotton and linen, just because they're very easy. But I love wearing silk. I love wearing silk. So if you are new to sewing silk and again wanting to try, I would definitely recommend a silk crepe de chine as number one, and number two being a silk charmeuse. Now, silk charmeuse has kind of a crepe on the back and then a shiny side on the front. But tip number one is I wash my silk in a washing machine, in my washing machine. I put my silk yardage into a washing machine with delicate soap, and then I put it in the dryer when it's yardage. Now, once it's become a garment, it goes into the washing machine on hand or delicate cycle, and then it gets air dried and then pressed or steamed or both, depending. But so it doesn't go into the dryer once it's been made into a garment. But for that first time, I like the way it changes the hand of the fabric just a little bit and makes it a little bit grippier. So with the charmeuse, where you've got the real shiny on one side and kind of crepe on the back, it almost gives, it takes a little bit of the shine off the shiny side, which I prefer because I don't like things overly shiny. That's not really my, again, my aesthetic. I go a little more minimalist and clean lines, even when it comes to my texture. So I like that it makes it a little bit more of like a washed silk feeling. It feels fantastic, but it roughs it up just enough. It's still shiny, but it roughs it up just enough that it makes it so much easier to handle when you're sewing. So washing machine with delicate soap and into the dryer as yardage. And then once it's a garment, washing machine, delicate cycle, delicate soap, and then I let it air dry and then steam or press as needed for the garment. The reason that I do this, a couple of reasons. Silk has been around for ages, well before dry cleaners were around, and it was being washed with water. If you pre-wash your yardage, you don't get water stains on your silk either, because you just wash it again and the water stain goes away. So you don't have to worry about your silk spotting when it comes to like water or anything damp if you go ahead and pre-wash. The last reason is that silk is a protein fiber, just like your hair. It does not like the chemicals at a dry cleaner. So I try and not do that to it at all. It prefers a delicate soap, like a shampoo even, because you would treat it like you would treat your hair. It's the same type of fiber. It's a protein fiber. It's a very strong fiber, but that is what I would do with my silk, and that is why I wash my silk. And, you know, then you don't have to, it makes it not as precious either when you can wash it yourself and you don't have to worry about taking it to a dry cleaner. So that is tip number 1. Okay, tip number 2. So now we've got our fabric washed. I suggest I don't have to do this when I'm sewing with silk crepe de chine or charmeuse, but with this little booger, I absolutely needed to. And if I were cutting bias strips, I would do this as well. I like to stabilize my fabric though with spray starch, just regular old spray starch. If you were a quilter, you can use the stuff that you guys use for your own bias tape. You know, because we're washing our silk, it doesn't matter. You put it on there. When you're ironing your yardage, just spray starch the crap out of all of it, and it's going to make it feel a little bit more cotton and makes it much easier to use. Now, I know there's quite a few people that swear by the gelatin method, where you are mixing gelatin with water, and then you soak your yardage in it, and then you let it dry, and then irons, and it makes it really, really stiff. I think that's a great method, and I know a lot of people swear by that method and use it a ton. I just find it, I don't know, that seems like a lot of extra steps and really messy. I've never tried that method, so I can't say for sure like how it works, but I do know a lot of people use that method. You can Google it if you're curious, but it's another way that people will stabilize their silk before cutting it, and just making it a little bit easier to use. So try it if you want. It just seems a little bit extra to me, and I get the same result with my spray starch and have not had any issues with it. So it's spray starch for me, but definitely you want to use whatever method works best for you. Okay, number 3 is when we're cutting it out. So now we have it all ironed and now we're ready to cut out our fabric. Because I have spray starched it, it really genuinely behaves. Now, with silk, my preferred method, and honestly, my preferred method with cutting out period is using pattern weights and a rotary cutter on a self-healing mat. I know not a lot of people have room to do all of that, so we'll get to that in just a second. The reason I prefer that over scissors is that with silk, and same with rayon, honestly, because it's slippery, when you are sticking your scissors underneath the fabric to cut, you're disrupting the fabric. You're knocking a little bit off grain. Even though it's minimal, as you're moving around the paper and cutting, it is pushing things off grain. Now, I know there's a lot of people too that'll recommend, you know, laying out a piece of tissue paper, then your fabric, and then another piece of tissue paper. So you're sandwiching your silk between tissue to help keep it stable. And I'm sure that works great. Again, it seems a little excess to me, a little bit of a waste of paper, to be honest. But, you know, if that is a way that you have learned to do it, that you enjoy doing it, definitely you can keep on doing that method. But with scissors, again, it picks it up. And if you're using slippery silk, like a charmeuse, for instance, as you're cutting, it pushes away. Now, the fix for this is a serrated scissor, not like a pinking shear. I think Kai makes some. There's a few different brands that make a serrated scissor. You can't tell that it's serrated by looking at it, but it has a better grab. So when you're going underneath that fabric and cutting, it's not, the slickness of the blade isn't pushing the fabric away. It's actually gripping it. So you aren't pushing things off grain as much as if you were using just your standard blade. So If you're not using a rotary cutter and pattern weights, I would recommend trying to find a serrated blade scissor to do with your cutting out of silk. Obviously, you know, if you don't have access to that, don't let that deter you from sewing with silk. Sewing with silk is actually really easy, and it's luxurious to wear, and it's really pretty easy to take care of. And it is such a strong fiber. It lasts forever and ever and ever. So I do recommend everyone trying it. Don't be scared. I know it's more expensive, but don't be scared to try and work with silk. It's actually a lot of fun. So yeah, that is tip 3. Sorry, I'm looking down here at my tips so I don't forget anything. All right, tip number 4. So now we have cut everything out and now it's time to sew, is to use a microtex needle. I prefer Schmetz. That's my favorite home sewing machine needle, but a microtex is nice and sharp and it's going to pierce through that silk. Like I mentioned, silk is very, very strong fiber. In fact, the first bulletproof vests were made with layers of silk. It was just layers of silk. So it's a very, very strong fiber. It will dull a blade and your needles much faster than cutting things paper with your scissors, much faster. It is a very strong fiber. In fact, I put a fresh microtex needle on the machine when I made this shirt. And there, again, this isn't a ton of sewing. Like there's minimal seams. It wasn't like, you know, I was making a coat. And my needle was clunking by the time I got to the end of this project, just on this one project. So you're going to want to replace your needle anytime, you know, you want to start a silk project with a fresh needle, and it's going to have to unfortunately be tossed as soon as you're done sewing with your silk, because it will be dull. So just so you know, silk is very dulling. Now with your scissors and blades, yeah, if you're cutting a lot of silk out, you're going to notice your blades getting a little bit duller, but you know, you can cut some aluminum foil. Have you guys ever tried that trick? Just cutting some strips of aluminum foil with your fabric scissors or your rotary cutter, and it helps just kind of hone it a little bit. It's not a replacement for sharpening them, but it does hone it. So it kind of helps add a little bit of the sharpness back in. Anyway, just a little side note, but silk will dull your sharp things as well as your pens as well. So just keeping that in mind. So that is tip 4. Okay, and then tip number 5. I get asked all the time what kind of thread that I use. Is that on here? Did I not put that on there? I've got 6 for you. Okay, forgot this little side note. Okay, so this will be tip 5, and then I'll give you tip 6. So I'm literally, I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget anything. All right, so tip 5, thread. I get asked all the time what kind of thread I use for what projects. In all honesty, for 90 to 95% of all of my sewing projects, my preferred thread is Gutermann Mara 100 for just an all-purpose polyester thread. I use that for 90 to 95% of my sewing. It's strong, it's durable, my machine loves it. I use it for pretty much everything. I know that there's quite a few people that will say, oh, when I sew with cotton or silk, I use cotton thread. That is completely up to you. I don't notice that big of a difference when I use a cotton thread with my cottons or my silks, especially not enough of a difference to have colors in cotton thread as well as colors in polyester thread. And I feel like polyester thread, I mean, it stands the test of time. It doesn't rot. I mean, I guess eventually it would, but it's just, I don't know. It just has longer staying power, which is why it's my preference. Now, don't ever use silk thread with silk garments. And the reason is that, and my mentor told me this, she had a huge stash of silk thread when she was giving me her stash. And I said, oh, can I have all this? And she goes, I will let you have this if you promise you're only using it for basting. So where I was going, because it is great for basting if you're going to be sewing and then it pulls out really easily for hand basting. She said, you never want to use silk thread on seams because silk is such a strong fiber that it saws through the fabric over time. So it will, even if you're, sewing it on a silk garment, it will over time cut through the fabric because the silk thread is such a strong fiber. So that's a little tidbit from my mentor, Joyce. So I don't ever use silk thread on anything other than hand basting when I'm doing that step. Okay. And then I guess number 6 is the seams for silk. My preferred seam finish when it can work, which is pretty, I don't know that not that I, especially with blouses, can think of any time it didn't work, but it's to use a French seam with your silk. Number 1, it's beautiful. Number 2, it's a nice strong finish. So if you've got a silk garment that's going to stand the test of time, it just is a really beautiful way to finish things off, because you're sewing each seam twice when you're doing a French seam. But it also is really beautiful because a lot of silks are a little bit more translucent, such as this Georgette. So, you're not seeing a seam finish. It looks really pretty on the inside, just like it would on the outside. So anything that is shadowing through to the right side, it just makes everything just a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more crisp. You can use a serger if you really wanted to, but I also find, especially with sergers, I have a hard time getting my tension correct with my serger when I'm finishing off silk seams, just because, again, the silk is a little harder for the needles to go through. I don't change my overlocker needles probably as often as I should. But I just find that it gets wrapped and pulled and puckered, kind of weird. But yes, French seams would be my recommendation for any kind of seam finish that you're going to want to use for your silk fabrics. It's just really beautiful. And unless you're sewing with something like a really, really heavy bottom weight silk, then you may want to serge your seams and, press things open. But for anything lighter weight, like blouse weight, or dresses that you're making, I would absolutely recommend doing French seams. It's beautiful, they're strong, and any show through that comes onto the right side looks beautiful as well. So there you have it. That ended up being 6 tips for sewing with silk. Guys, I hope you all will give it a try, especially if you have any silk that's loitering in your stashes. I know that that's a common one that you've picked up from somewhere, and it's got, it's a precious fabric to you because it holds memories from where you grabbed it. But I really hope you'll give it a try, because it really is not hard. And just by doing a couple of extra things, you really will have a garment that's going to last you forever. So I hope you go out and try some silk. And there's just nothing more luxurious than having silk on your body. It just really makes you feel better. No matter what, makes you feel a little more glamorous, a little more put together, just because you can feel the silk on your body. I'm a big proponent of that. All right, guys, that is it for today. I hope you will give silk sewing a try. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I'll answer those as soon as possible. And I will see you guys again on Friday. Have a good week and get some sewing in.